And welcome back to Consumer Choice Radio, broadcasting here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM and Sauga 960 AM. We're here once a week, internationally syndicated, bringing you the best stories on consumer topics from around the world. And here we have a repeat guest, a friend of the show, Dr. Kimberlee Josephson. She's the Assistant Professor of Business and the Associate Dean for the Breen Center for Graduate Excellence at Lebanon Valley College. Dr. Josephson, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me again. And actually a slight change since the last time we spoke. I've been promoted to associate professor and received tenure. So that's a big milestone for my career, and I couldn't be happier.
Wow, tenure. Okay, so she can say anything she wants, David, and no consequences. Yeah. And also granted tenure, whereas Nicole Hannah-Jones down there at UNC did not get it. That's another topic. But we had a couple of articles that we wanted to discuss with you. I know it's been a whirlwind of change, particularly in the political scene. Kind of the coronavirus is fading by as we have more vaccinations, and there's more focus on companies, corporations, and their various bills in Washington that aim to regulate or tax or change how certain things are. And you had a great article. You had actually two of them on fee.org about corporate social responsibility. We talked about that last time that you were on the program, which our viewers can find by going to consumerchoiceradio.com. And this time you're talking about Warren Buffett's stance on this. Now, he's definitely a big investor, one of the richest men in the world. And you say that he's snubbed social responsibility as a craze. And you say that he's right. Tell us a little bit about that and why you think good old Mr. Buffett has taken the right road.
Yeah, so I mean, and maybe to give a little context as to why I have such an interest in this realm and why I'm writing articles on this is that, social responsibility has really dramatically evolved over the years. And when you hear something that sounds good, we just sometimes assume it's good. And in terms of, well, what are the long-term implications? Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to see what comes about of that. And so I have business students, who have a real interest in, being entrepreneurs, launching their own businesses, just being good managers and things like that. And so we do cover what's known as ESG metrics, so economic, social, and governance, talking about the triple bottom line, people, planet, profit, and things like that. But it, to some extent, has gone to the extreme too, where now you have organizations that are trying to abide by certain stipulations or their own preconceived expectations in regards to the environment and in regards to social issues. And they're kind of entering almost into murky waters because it's not always, you're not always able to measure it, or you're not always able to see if it's having a positive impact. And it could even be a misuse of shareholder money, because at the end of the day, the shareholders, right, it's their private property, that's their money, that's their investment, and they invested in the business. They didn't invest in these social initiatives. So it can get, a little tricky in that regard. And so, but we have kind of seen this snowball effect where, industry leaders are taking on this charge and promoting it and, taking CSR very seriously. So CSR is corporate social responsibility, but going beyond just kind of philanthropic donations and really be taking part in forms of activism, right? And so I think it was a good signal that you had someone of such a status as Warren Buffett to say, let's rethink this, right? And this is not the first time he's come, he's opened up about his concerns regarding these metrics. And additionally, we could even see these metrics if it's something that's imposed by industry leaders. It creates entry barriers for those that are smaller firms or don't have, the profit or the capacity to put their proceeds towards these efforts and events and things like that.
Now, I'm interested to hear your take. So we've seen a lot of what activists will call greenwashing when it comes to environmental concerns. Are you kind of seeing an emerging trend of maybe woke washing, where firms are signaling their commitment to causes without actually doing anything to substantially benefit them? I have no idea. That's kind of why I'm asking, but I'm interested to hear if woke washing is becoming a popular trend.
Yeah, well, I actually, that's kind of a fun term, the idea of woke washing. So, greenwashing has been reused in different formats to kind of convey this somewhat facade of, hey, we're doing good, but really behind the scenes, not so much. I think a lot of organizations sometimes have really great intentions, but in terms of the activism that they might portray, there might be a disconnect. So, uh, I'm a big fan of, decentralizing power within organizations and even within society too. And if you have an organization that, let's say, they're espousing a certain value or putting big bucks behind a certain movement or something like that, but at the end of the day, the individuals within the organization are not feeling valued or not being, not feeling like they're following through on what it is they're saying, that's just a bad approach. I really think in terms of this idea of woke washing, like you said, I think that's a good approach because a lot of organizations, they do come out with their, slogans or their pitches in regards to social movements or, environmental concerns. But then behind the scenes, what they're doing is maybe has a disconnect with that, and when that comes to light, they get red flagged for it. And there are a lot of examples where this has happened, actually. So if you were to Google, cause-related marketing campaigns gone wrong, there's a slew of these. And so I feel that these organizations are maybe going outside their area of competencies, like what they know, what they do well. They went into business to be a business, produce a product, and you can compete in terms of quality and efficiency and cost and value. In terms of competing in relation to like yeah, CSR initiatives, right? There's always going to be another bandwagon to join. There's always going to be a new crisis. There's always going to be something else that they could jump on. And also, it almost makes kind of a marketing concern too, because if you're saying, "Hey, we're helping this," once it gets better, you can't market that anymore. So you can compete in terms of a product, in terms of an offering, in terms of this kind of emotional appeal and psychological, right? It creates some inconsistencies, it creates some disconnect, and also it can even alienate members of your audience who maybe don't agree with what it is you're doing.
Listening to Consumer Choice Radio, we're speaking with Dr. Kimberlee Josephson, now tenured associate professor over there at the Lebanon Valley College in Annville, Pennsylvania. One thing I wanted to ask about, we talked about corporate responsibility, which is very external in terms of what a company does and their own marketing or their own initiatives. I wanted to ask about internally. There has been a sort of a trend among some companies where they've actually banned pretty much all social and political discussions at work, just because it doesn't focus on exactly what the company is supposed to do. One example is Basecamp. The CEO, Jason Fried, put this blog post out there saying that employees will, quote, no longer be allowed to openly share their societal and political discussions at work. You saw a little bit of an uproar internally. I think it was something like 60 people who eventually left. But it's sort of this trend. There are companies like Coinbase where essentially they have focused all their efforts on their product, their services. They're not going to get into politics. They're not going to try to use the social justice cause. Is that something that internally is causing a rift? Is there more pressure from employees to try to adopt a more corporate social responsibility view?
Yeah, well, and once again, this is something that I'm so glad you brought this example up because I actually used the Basecamp memo in my course as a discussion point. And it is really interesting to see how some students, are like, yeah, I agree with this. This is good. Just let me do my job. I was hired for this. That's what I want to focus on and become an expert in. And I want to appreciate my colleagues and I want to get along with them, but also I don't have to necessarily agree with them. I don't necessarily have to get into, hot debates with them. We're there to do a job. That's what we sign up for. Whereas then, I have other students who are feeling more like, well, I want to feel part of something important. I want to feel very connected. If I want to share my beliefs or opinions, I should be able to do so. What it goes back to, though, is once again that thought of let's decentralize the power, right? So in terms of Basecamp, if that company wants to have that type of policy and that type of organizational culture, they have every right to do so. And just as we saw with the employees, they have the right to leave. It's a voluntary exchange going on in the marketplace. If it's something that really goes against their value system and that they don't want to continue working there, they have every right to leave and vote with their feet. Just how we say in consumer trends, you vote with your dollars, right? So same thing within organizations. The founders of an organization, it really is, it's theirs to run as they see fit, right? Now, in terms of whether or not they're going to attract the type of employee base that they want or turn people away or things like that, there could be ramifications, but they have the right to do so.
And so on this, I'm kind of torn on the Basecamp memo, because in one sense I really understand it, but on the other hand, employees naturally talk about the things that interest them on a daily basis, whether it's the latest episode of Grey's Anatomy or what the former president tweeted, what ridiculous statement Donald Trump said, or what have you. It really is a wide array of subject areas, but it feels like politics is increasingly becoming more important in terms of people's personal identity. I'm not sure if there's data to back that up, but I'm curious if you think that some of this internal strife is just the kind of the boiling point of the political culture today, generally speaking. Like, are we so polarized that it's now uncomfortable in the workplace, and that's why we have things like the Basecamp memo?
Yeah, so I mean, it is important to acknowledge that most of our lives are spent at work in our career, right? So it is really important for you to find an organization or a position where you really like the people, you feel connected to that organization. We usually work for companies and feel fulfilled when we feel connected to the people within it, right? An example I give in class is, no matter how much, and maybe I even shared this with you last time, but it doesn't matter how much you enjoy playing the guitar for a band. If you hate your bandmates, you're gonna, leave. That's why you have all these great band breakups over the year, right? You have to have that connection with the employees. I think a problem actually does come back to kind of foundational skills, soft skills. And this is something that we really focus on at Lebanon Valley College, is this kind of promotion of critical thinking, interpersonal skills, because you have a generation, right? They're all digital natives, right? They know how to respond to, posts and what to, how to frame something beautifully in their Instagram and things like that. But in terms of actual engagement and discussion, and also, like having a little bit of a, backbone in terms of things are going to be maybe said that might offend you, that, might rub you the wrong way, that you might not think about in a certain way, or you're exposed to. And this is something that I think is a value when you think about a residential college, is that, you are going to be exposed to different perspectives, different different positions, different people. And I think people, especially now because of, COVID and being in lockdown, it's more important for us to interact and engage with others in real time, in real person, not just virtually, but really have rich communication, and kind of, promote that idea of that it's okay to challenge ideas. It's okay to think outside the box. Actually, the World Economic Forum says, the top skills that are required for the workforce today that we need: communication and critical thinking, right? And so that tells us that there is a lack in that. And so that is the problem, is that if you're not able to communicate, if you're not able to convey your thoughts, and also if you're not able to know when to just listen, right? Be an active listener, empathize, things like that, and use a level of discernment. That's why we're having problems in the workplace. We have different ideas and events being thrown at us constantly online, in the media, on the news, right? And not sure even in terms of what to trust and what's true. And so if you don't have those critical thinking skills or the ability to communicate what it is your concerns are, right? That's what's causing issues within the workplace.
There we go. Always great insight from Dr. Kimberlee Josephson, now tenured professor, Lebanon Valley College. Dr. Josephson, thanks so much for coming on Consumer Choice Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.